With the NBA Summer League coming to a close, we have seen the best and the worst of our rookies to date. With that said, Andy Larson actually created an article detailing on the Salt Lake Tribune exactly what he felt like the starting lineup and the rotation should look like for the Utah Jazz coming into next season if the roster stays consistent and there are no trades or releasings that ends up happening. In that same vein, I found it interesting the way he constructed it, and I did, for the most part, agree with him, with the exception of one particular player being Drew Eubanks, who I still to this moment don't understand why we ended up picking him up. We ended up letting Omer Yurtseven go, but the issue was we thought, in my mind at least, that it was going to be because they wanted to add somebody newer to make extra minutes for some of the rookies they were bringing in. Well, they brought in Kyle Filipowski, but the issue was they ended up signing Drew Eubanks the exact same day they let go of Big Yurt, which has me a little confused because we're supposed to be tanking this year, allegedly. Now, if Drew Eubanks is the big game hunting that Danny Ainge was talking about, then we've got some other problems because Drew Eubanks is not about no big money. Respectfully, he's a decent big, but I think he would be better served on a contending roster as opposed to a tanking one. This kind of feels similar to a Jonas Valanciunas going to a team like the Washington Wizards, where they're not necessarily the most garbage, but they're definitely not going anywhere anytime soon in the rest of the league's eyes, to say the least. With that in mind, though, his starters went as follows: Keontae George, Colin Sexton, Cody Williams, Larry Markkinen, and Walker Kessler. As rotational pieces, he had Isaiah Collier, Jordan Clarkson, Taylor Hendricks, John Collins, and Drew Eubanks. And as the little plug-and-play pieces that get a little bit of time here and there, he had Johnny Ujang, he had Darius Baisley, you had Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, and Kenneth Lofton Jr. Overall, I don't hate this rotation. It makes a lot of sense to me. A lot of these players are young. Most of them are under like 23, which is even crazier to think about. And the majority of their working rotation is going to be significantly younger players than most teams are accustomed to having on the roster, which makes sense. I personally felt like it could be a toss-up whether you want to start Walker Kessler or if you want to go the same way they went last season, where they went John Collins. I feel like John Collins, with a full year of preparation and understanding in the system, should be a lot better because his familiarity was an issue before the trade deadline, and then they were talking about how they wanted to get rid of him. And then he started putting in a lot more time in the books, and it started showing on the court with his effort and overall consistency as far as understanding where he needed to be on defense specifically, even though his jumper ended up falling off as the season continues. While he didn't see the bench very much last season, I could see him seeing the bench a lot more this year. If that's the case, Walker Kessler starting would make a lot of sense. But I would also like to see a world where you have a Taylor Hendricks in that starting lineup. Cody Williams, I feel like one of the rookies ends up having to start. Yes, you're going to be a team that's pretty mediocre at best. So if there's going to be somebody that starts, it's probably going to be Cody Williams. I personally would love to see Taylor Hendricks start because to me, it's time for him to make or break who he's going to be as a player. Because for the most of last season, a lot of people called him a bust because he spent so much time in the G League. When in fact, over half of the rookie class from the first round spent a significant period of time, or at least a couple games in the G League last year. So it made sense to me that he was just going to take a little bit more time to cook. That didn't mean that he was a bust because everybody was doing the exact same thing. Everybody was taking a little bit more time. I believe that his shot is a little inconsistent, but when he shoots confidently and he's playing within himself, similarly to the one summer league game where he shot 9 of 10 from the field, which was absolutely bonkers. I don't expect him to do that in the regular season, but if he could shoot even 48% from the field and go 205 from 3, I think that's very feasible and within his grasp. It's just about him actually doing it. The thing that Andy Larson brought up, though, was the fact that Cody Williams is the best offensive connector by comparison between himself and Bryce Sensabaugh. Yes, some people would argue that Bryce Sensabaugh is the most scoring oriented, but because Cody Williams has a nice blend of confidence on offense and ability to shoot along with defensive ability, even though he's listed as being sub 200, he just needs to gain a little bit of weight. With that in mind, I could see a world where it makes sense to play him alongside Keontae George and Colin Sexton because that will give Keontae George specifically more opportunities to play with people that are going to be on the floor at the same time as him and just have a certain level of continuous consistency despite a lot of things. Colin Sexton to me is a no-brainer. As everybody knows, I don't have the jersey up behind me, but I am a young bull glazer because to me his energy is just second to none. Now, one thing that Andy Larson said that I didn't necessarily agree with was his critique of the overall play when he was referring to Isaiah Collier in comparison to the guards already on the roster. With him being obviously probably the fourth guard on the roster, you have Keontae George, you have Colin Sexton, and you have Jordan Clarkson. To me, he did detail that Colin Sexton was the most efficient out of them by a decent margin, but that his efficiency wasn't necessarily mind-boggling, which is factually accurate. Quite simply, he was clearly better than Jordan Clarkson, as Jordan Clarkson had one of the worst shooting seasons of his career, and then Keontae George was just incredibly inconsistent as a rookie. Overall, playmaking-wise, Colin Sexton was significantly better, particularly after he started to get opportunities to start in games around the midway point of the season. That's where you saw him really pick up and really make adjustments. Defensively, though, Andy said that all three of them suffered because of their lack of height as well as inconsistencies as far as effort goes. And I would disagree for Colin Sexton because his is literally just height. The energy's always there. The vibes are always there. He's literally the Energizer Bunny personified because he's all over the floor. He's hyping people up. When he gets sent to the bench and somebody makes a play, he's jumping off the bench and hyping people up on the sideline. That's just the type of guy he is. So for him, I would say that it's purely based on the fact that he's literally probably 6'1", maybe 6'2" on a good day barefoot, compared to Keontae George and Jordan Clarkson, who are listed at both being 6'4". I see a world where you do prefer to have Isaiah Collier on the floor, and because Danny Ainge isn't necessarily sold on Keontae George playing the one, it makes sense to put him at the 2 and allow Colin Sexton to run the 1, and then it allows Isaiah Collier to kind of work his way in there, get 10, 15 minutes a night. Maybe if somebody's out, he gets a little bit of extra burn, just kind of depending on the situation. I believe that Jordan Clarkson kind of should have been traded this offseason, but he doesn't seem to have that much left in the tank. So I could see a world where they just kind of keep him on the roster and just burn him out for what he has left, because he has been a very big culture person and the Utah Jazz faithful love him. Like I said, Taylor Hendricks to me should be starting. I think that it's time for him to prove his worth as opposed to giving the opportunity to Cody Williams. But Cody Williams is, in my eyes, going to be a very solid prospect for the Utah Jazz. So you can't even get mad at that. John Collins is kind of a toss-up right now because his shooting did fall off a cliff at the end of the season, but he did progressively get better defensively, so it begs the question, was it worth it? Was it not? How are we feeling there? Like I said, Drew Eubanks should have never been signed to the roster. I still am waiting on a particular interview with somebody from the upper brass that details exactly what the logic was behind that, because what effectively happens because of Drew Eubanks is, like I said before, guys like Kenneth Lofton Jr. and Kyle Filipowski don't get minutes like they need to get minutes. And after what I saw in the summer league of Kyle Filipowski specifically, I would love to see him on the court. And I think he has more offensive upside than Drew Eubanks. And defensively, they're not going to be that too far off because Drew Eubanks isn't an elite big defender and he doesn't have elite switchability. But Kyle Filipowski, as far as having a Kelly Olynyk type of role going into this next season, would be extremely possible. And even if it doesn't end up working out, I could see him just getting sent to the G League, which is perfectly fine because some guys need a little bit extra time. And he also slipped all the way to the second round because of stuff that was off the court that really didn't even matter that much when it comes down to how you hoop. And honestly, I could care less. Bryce Sensabaugh is going to be the guy that's pretty short on minutes. There's not going to be a lot of open opportunities. If Jordan Clarkson wasn't in the rotation and he had been traded away, or maybe a John Collins or something like that, then I could see him getting more burn, but that's just not going to be the most feasible right now at the very least. Darius Bazley showed out in the summer league, but he's still going to take a little bit more time to crack the rotation. I love what he brings defensively, specifically as a hustle player, also being able to hit 3 balls and shoot them confidently, and also just hit his shots on offense, period, while not taking away from the offense and just finding his little niche buckets here and there with what is provided before him. Johnny is just one of those players where he has good games, then he has games where he's just kind of out there on the court. He's not an elite defender, and sometimes he can be a very obvious negative, but overall, he's just a comfortable guy that plays a lot of G League minutes, plays some minutes on the regular team when they were tanking at the end of the year, and he just kind of vibes out and has fun. And you can always have a guy like that on the roster because they don't take up too much of anything that you're trying to do, and they'll never really get in the way of the progress of any of the other young guys because they understand their role. But let me know, do you guys agree with my personal starting lineup, or do you think that there is a particular lineup that you would like to see run? Is there any particular combination of front court or backcourt players that you would like to see? I know that some people wanted to see a world where you have Larry Markkanen and Kyle Filipowski on the floor specifically at the same time alongside Taylor Hendricks to see how crazy that potential defensive lineup could look while also having the offensive upside of shooting. But that remains to be seen, and it's going to be a little minute before we get any confirmation about what the starting of the season lineups are going to look like. Either way, I'll be here to cover it, so go ahead and get ready to smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Also, donate or become a member to help support the content. It's your boy Wraith Hoops, and like always, comment your thoughts below, but most importantly, good morning, good evening, and good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.